Hello, this is Landon Hadley, and this is my final presentation for my Communications 2050 class. And I've selected to present on the spiral of silence theory. And this theory is important because it plays a key role in sensitive conversations that we can have in the workplace, in our homes, with strangers, honestly, with anyone. And this theory relates to that. So, in this presentation, I'm going to talk about the definition of the theory, where the theory stands today. I'm going to give it a quick evaluation and then suggest an improvement for this theory. And then I'm going to conclude with some of the things that I've learned. So this picture right here is a picture of Elizabeth Noel Newman. Elizabeth was born in late 1916 in Germany. It was in Berlin that she grew up and attended a lot of different schools. Her family kept moving around a lot when she was a child. And then she attended various universities. She actually studied political science, and that was where she started her career. She did have a pretty diverse career, though. Prior to being a political scientist, she was an author for a Nazi newspaper, and she wrote some significant articles that had become very popular in that age. But it was in the early 1970s that she formed the spiral of silence theory. And it's important to know that this was before the internet age, so her theory was developed through lots of research, a lot of research, especially dating in the years, or let's see, the 1930s to the 1940s. Elizabeth observed the media and how it gave a lot of attention to majority viewpoints, but she noticed that the minority viewpoints did not receive a lot of attention or validation. So to define this theory, we need to focus on what happens when people provide their opinions on a variety of issues. So the spiral of silence theory suggests that people who believe that they hold a minority viewpoint on a public issue, they will remain in the background where their communication will be restrained. And those who believe that they hold a majority viewpoint will be more encouraged to speak up and voice their opinion. The spiral of silence theory falls under the approach type of positivistic or empirical. It falls into this category because this theory takes the approach of accepting the truth as value neutral. So the theory is researched and formed through objective observations. And this basically means that Elizabeth had a hypothesis and she did observations to test her hypothesis, and then she came to a conclusion which initially created this theory. So here we are 40 years later. The theory has been created, and the theory discusses how the media puts out a lot of messages and how those messages can bombard us in an overwhelming way. But the theory has only been proven to be more and more true as we see agendas and messages that are pushed through videos we watch on YouTube, articles we read on blogs, commercials we see on TV, any media platform really that you can think of. There's a message that's being pushed. So this theory, not only does it discuss those messages that are pushed through media, but it also is applied by a lot of scholars. These scholars talk about how minority viewpoint holders can be quiet during significant events. So let's evaluate the theory. The primary focus on the strength that I want to list here is that the theory has been standing strong for over 40 years now, and it has provoked a lot of thought in the continuing world. I think the greatest weakness that this theory has falls under its poor logical consistency. And the reason that I would say this theory seems to be inconsistent is because it can be really difficult to state why someone will or will not share an opinion of theirs, when they're in a group environment. So people have different reasons for sharing or not sharing, and it can be hard to judge all of those consistently and evenly because everyone's differences and experiences vary so vastly that it's hard to really know. Okay, so to most efficiently evaluate this theory, let's apply it somewhere so we can see how this theory can work into our everyday life situation. So Elizabeth actually had an experiment that she set up. This experiment involved people who smoked and people who did not smoke. And so she had these two different groups of people sitting in one room, and she led the conversation with the kind of like the topic sentence, I guess you could say, that smokers are inconsiderate. So this made the non-smokers, the people who didn't smoke, feel like they had the majority viewpoint. They talked about these people were very vocal who didn't smoke, and they discussed how smokers would push their bad habits on other people by smoking in a close region of people who didn't smoke. They talked about how this was inconsiderate because it forced them to inhale their smoke, and obviously that's not a healthy thing to do. So in these group meetings, it was noticed that the smokers kept quiet because they felt that their viewpoints were minority viewpoints. So, this was a controlled environment where the test was really to see how smokers would react to the situation. And the result fell right in line with what Elizabeth was expecting, what her hypothesis was that the minority group would be quiet and they would restrain their actual opinions. So, Elizabeth had observations where she would sit and observe these two separate groups that we had. We had the smoking group and the non smoking group. But a suggestion that I would make to improve this theory would be to have the two separate groups interviewed individually after they had separated and after the group discussion had concluded. And I think that this would be really effective because we could not only see where people had conformed with a majority viewpoint, but we could also see where people decided to not speak up with the disagreeing viewpoint that they may have had at some point. And I think that that would make this theory a bit more reliable and consistent. So to conclude here, we have talked about the spiral of silence theory and we've defined that theory. We've seen how it applies in a group setting. This theory has been with us for over 40 years and it is based upon people's opinions, so it is hard to really know for sure when people will or will not share their opinions.